Hey y'all, it's Kate from the Literary Apothecary, and today I'm going to be doing the tag My Ideal Bookshelf tag. This was created by Kim at Bookmarks and Breadsticks, and she tagged me, and I will link her video and her channel down in the description below. This is my ideal bookshelf according to this tag. We're going to talk about every single one of these books really quickly in this video and hope that the book stack does not fall over. So let's just get right into it. So question 1, the first book you remember reading as a child. And this might not be the first book I remember reading because I don't remember the very first book I read by my own, but I was obsessed with the Curious George books by Margaret and H.A. Rice. I used to read these books so much. This might actually be the correct answer for this question because I used these books to teach myself how to read and write before I went to kindergarten. At first, I would sit there with the Curious George book and some tracing paper, and I would just trace over the pages over and over and over again. And I did it so much that I started learning the letters and what they meant, and then I learned that the letters create words and words create stories, and that's how I learned how to write and read before I was even in kindergarten. So when I went to kindergarten, my teacher had no idea what to do with me because that's what you learn in kindergarten, at least then that's what you learned. So book that you remember reading first book you remember reading as a child, Curious George books. Next question. A book you received as a gift that you still own today. And for me, this is The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, I believe. Let me check. Yes, Kenneth Grahame. And so this copy I received for one of my birthdays. I think I was in college at the time, from my mom, and this was actually the copy that my mom had when she was a kid, and this was her favorite book as a kid. So this book is special to me because it was a book that my mom used to own as a kid, and then she passed it on to me. And one of the things that my mom used to do when she would get me books is she would write in it. So I have this little note from her that says, "Kate, I'm so proud of you. As my future author, I thought I would give you my favorite book from childhood. This is Grandma Great's copy. She used to read to me. I love you very much. Love, Mom." And so this book is really special to me because it has that historical link to it with my family. Number 3, a book that was important to your teenage years. And for me, as a teenager, I was obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Dickinson. I used to read her poems non-stop. I was like that weird emo kid before it was cool to be emo, and I just loved Emily Dickinson and Edgar Allan Poe so much. They were so dark, but they were so truthful, and Emily Dickinson's poems just spoke to that part of me that I couldn't bring out because I was afraid to, but it just was a weird it was a hug to me in an almost weird kind of way. I loved her poems so much, and I still do to this day. And you can see all of these markers in here are, some of the great poems by Emily, and she is just a fantastic poet. If you haven't read Emily Dickinson yet, you need to go read her because her poems are so good. Question 4, a book that you can always go back to. And for me, this is the giant collection, We Tell Ourselves Stories in Order to Live by Joan Didion. And this is a collection of essays by Joan, and she is by far one of my favorite nonfiction writers. She also writes fiction and poems, and she has a new book that just came out, I believe, in January. I can't wait to get to that. But Joan Didion is someone that I will read over and over and over again. And this is such a big book of essays, and she covers so many different topics that no matter what you're in the mood for, she's got an essay on it likely. And I can always relate to Joan Didion's writing, even though she's so much older than me and she wrote about the 60s and 70s. I still feel like I can relate to her writing, and she's just amazing with words. Her writing is so good. So a book that you can always go back to, We Tell Ourselves Stories in Order to Live by Joan Didion. And look at that cover. That's just such a cool cover. Question number 5, a book that brings you the feeling of pride. And for me, this is going to be a little known book called The Unknown Knight, The Genius and Madness of R.A. Blakelak, an American Painter by Glenn Vincent. And for me, this brings a sense of pride because this painter here, R.A. Blakelak, the guy in the picture here on the spine, that's my great-great-grandfather. And he was, like it says, an American painter. And in the art history world, especially the American art history world, landscape painting, he's kind of famous. He was a great painter back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, and he had a very, very bad case of schizophrenia, but his paintings in the art world are pretty well known, especially his most famous paintings. And so this book gives me that sense of pride because this is my family, and there's been books written about him, and people in the art world know him. And one day I did my MFA thesis that kind of revolved around him, and I went to a museum in town to look at some of his paintings that they had there in storage. And I got to talk to the curator of at the museum about him and his paintings, and I learned so much. But when me and my mom went there, they basically rolled out the red carpet for us, and it was the coolest, weirdest thing ever. Like, they treated us like we were celebrities just because we were descendants of R.A. Blakelak, also known as Ralph Albert Blakelak, and he was like I said, my great-great-grandfather. He was my grandpa's grandpa. And that was just so exciting for me. So this is a book that always brings me pride. A book that brings you the feeling of wonder. And this one, I'm going to go with another nonfiction book, and that is We Have No Idea, A Guide to the Unknown Universe by George Cham and Daniel Whiteson. This book is such an interesting book and available for purchase at our literary apothecary. So this book goes into everything we don't know about the universe. Like, scientists like to say we know this, but this book talks about all the things that we don't know and why we don't know it, and maybe how we can learn to come to know it, but definitely the things that we don't know in the universe. And there's so much, and it's written in such an accessible way that you don't have to be an aerospace scientist. You don't have to know anything about space to understand what they're talking about. And it just gives you an idea of just how much we really don't know about the universe. I love it. The book you've reread the most or loved the most. So for me, that would be the entire Harry Potter series, really, but especially Sorcerer's Stone. Until like last year, I usually reread this series every single year, and I somehow find something new in this series every single time I reread it. So I would say this is the book I've reread the most because I usually reread it every year. Now question 8. A book you want to have on your shelves forever. And for me, this is a book you haven't heard me talk about yet, but it's In the Kingdom of Men by Kim Barnes. And the reason why I chose this book is because this book is written by my MFA mentor and life coach, really. Kim is amazing. Kim Barnes. She also wrote A Country Called Home, if you can see in the bottom. That was a Penn USA award winning, and also was like a Pulitzer finalist. That was her first book. She's amazing, and I believe it's becoming a movie now, or it was going to be before COVID hit. And this book is a great book, and it's signed by Kim, and it just reminds me of my MFA years and how amazing Kim and how amazing and influential Kim was during those years out in Idaho. And so I just had to give props to Kim Barnes, who's an amazing fiction and nonfiction writer. This is a fiction book, but she also wrote nonfiction. You have to check her out someday. She is by far one of the best people I know, and I just love her writing and her in general. And we're almost done. 2 more questions. Question 9, a book on your shelf that you want everyone to read. And besides all of the books I've mentioned here, I would say I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This book is amazing and so influential. I read this book the first time, I think it was last year or the year before that, and it changed my life. Even at 30-some years. Maya Angelou is a goddess with words, and this book just opened your eyes so much. It is so beautiful. It's her memoir, and it's just one of my favorite books to ever be written, and I wish everyone read this book. And then the last question, a book that reminds you of a specific moment or period in your life. And for me, this is The Story of King Arthur and His Knights by Howard Pyle. So when I was in college, I was in various different majors trying to find my way where I fit in college, and I finally decided on being an English major because all I wanted to do was read, which I still all I want to do. And then I took a class on the Arthurian legend and King Arthur and all of his knights and Merlin and Morgana and all that revolves around the Arthurian legend, and that was my favorite class out of the entire degree. I loved that class so much. Everything I read I loved, and so this book reminds me of that class, and that was the class that kind of made me feel like I finally fit in and found my place. And if you haven't read this book by Howard Pyle, you should. It's fantastic, and it's like a bunch of short stories, and it's just absolutely fabulous. I love it, and I love the Arthurian legend. Everything about it I am fascinated by, and it is just so good. So then the last bit of this, as you know if you've seen any other tag videos, is to tag some friends. So here I tag Abby Salter Books, I tag Ellen at Library of Alexandria, Leslie at The Nerdy Narrative, I tag Evie at She Was Only Evie, and Jessie at The Bookish Mom. And so tag You're It. That was my video for the My Ideal Bookshelf tag, created again by Kim at Bookmarks and Breadsticks. And that's it for now. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what your answers are to the questions. I'll put the questions in the descriptions. And keep reading, and I love you all to the moon and back. Bye.